Awesome. Okay. So it is my privilege to welcome our next session presenter, Dr. Travis Deyle. Dr. Deyle is a Nebraska native who is the co-founder and CEO of Cobalt Robotics, a physical security services provider that builds autonomous indoor robots to help ensure employees in offices, facilities, and any work environment remain safe. In his role at Cobalt, Travis brings an extensive academic background in robotics. He is an acclaimed scientist and technologist and holds a PhD in robotics from Georgia Tech and multiple degrees from the University of Nebraska. In 2015, Dr. Deyle was named one of MIT's Technology Review's top innovators under 35. So without further ado, I present to you Dr. Travis Deyle.
Awesome. Thanks, Dr. Gilmore. Yeah, welcome everybody. Thank you for making it to my session. So today I figured it's always interesting to see the progression of going from those earliest days learning about computer science, programming, mechanics, electronics, up to building your first robots and then ultimately making a career out of it. And so what I figured I'd do today is just kind of share with you the progression that I've had over the years using as many visual aids as I can. Unfortunately, most of my earlier work predated the smart camera. And so I don't have a lot of pictures from the early days, but I can share with you some of the things that we did during grad school. So, in the mid to early 2000s, and then, progressing into where Cobalt Robotics is today, and even looking at the future of where robots are headed over the next decade. And so given the limited time, I figure I'll jump right in. So yes, again, welcome. Like Dr. Gilmore said, I'm a Nebraska native. I grew up out in central Nebraska before moving to Omaha. Spent a lot of time out on my grandfather's farm. You can see us here driving around the farm, in the combine, playing around. Was always a huge STEM advocate. So was really into astronomy, taught myself electronics. My grandfather out there on the farm, we had a big old machine shop where we learned how to basically build anything with our hands. And so, those earliest days, we were building little solar-powered robots that would follow the light. We built some really big hexapod walking robots based on, using windshield wiper motors pulled from old cars. And so, yeah, it was really fun. We grew up out in the sort of the Kearney area, out between Kearney and Minden. And then when I was in middle school, we moved to Omaha, where I ultimately went to the University of Nebraska, right there at Peter Kiewit Institute. And I wish I had pictures from undergrad. We did lots of fun projects and things. Unfortunately, like I said, it predated smartphones and things, so I don't have as many pictures from there. But I did go to University of Nebraska and then ultimately ended up at Georgia Tech to do my PhD. I had the privilege of working on some of the most sophisticated robots of their time. And our lab was very blessed to have a number of very large, capable robots. And so I'm going to kind of focus on these four. These are the robots that we built from scratch, initially programmed, and then had them doing useful activities. And so the first one here is Ellie on the far right. Ellie was a robot that I helped hand assemble from components to build her up. Incredible amount of sensors on this robot for the time, mobile base, a robot arm, and then a whole bunch of other sensors that you could use to fuse together, images, information from RFID tags, laser scanners, to be able to go around and basically to be able to pick up objects off of tables, off the floor, and to do other useful tasks such as, going through and turning on and off the lights, dumping things into trash cans. And at the time, the computer vision wasn't what it is today, right? We didn't have deep learning algorithms and things that could recognize a light switch. And so we would pull inspiration from things like service animals, like service dogs or helper monkeys, to be able to go through and make the robot more amenable to this task in the home by making objects easier to grab, easier to perceive. And it was through this that we were able to do some of the first tasks in the world, like doing medication delivery to people in their home. This is actually me taking the robot to my apartment. Ignore the mess in the background. But this was literally the first time that one of these large mobile robots with manipulation was actually placed in home environments. So moving around just an average person's home doing useful tasks. And so we sort of hold that distinction of, to my knowledge, we were the first and only ones to do that. And that was all the way back in 2006, 2007. Some of my colleagues built systems that let you command the robot with a laser pointer. You just shine a laser at the thing you want the robot to go get, and it would go and get it or deliver things. And some of those colleagues even went on to build the very first systems that could open and traverse doors. And so it seems like a very simple task, right? Like just reach out and open a door. It actually turns out to be a very challenging task. And you still don't see commercial robots today opening and traversing through doors. But that was research capabilities that we built, more than a decade ago at this point. And so that was Ellie. Ellie was a very interesting robot. And then we went on and we said, what would it look like if we took Ellie and we tried to make it much cheaper, much smaller, so that we could actually, Ellie was probably cost about $150,000 at the time. So it was a very expensive robot. And so we went and we built this robot called Dusty, which was a very simple modification to a Roomba vacuum cleaner that would be able to go and pick objects up off the floor for people who had motor impairments. So, if you're an older adult, it might be hard to reach down and pick up an object off the floor. This is actually one of the big reasons people end up in nursing homes. And so we said, let's build a very simple system, very simple mechanism that could pick up that item off the floor, lift it up high enough for somebody to just be able to grab it without bending over. And so actually there's variants of this system that are now being commercialized today as well, which is kind of neat. But it was a fun, short exploration. Then we moved on to this robot called Cody. Cody was very interesting. So you can see Cody has 2 arms. It's roughly the same size as a human being. These arms were compliant. You could go up and push on these arms and they just, they're elastic, they move around. It's kind of like going up and pushing on your arm. And so we were really deploying Cody to start to understand, how can we make these robots inherently safe around people? And so, and if you look at Cody, you'll notice some interesting things like these wheels down here at the bottom. They're Swedish Mecanum wheels. They let the robot go side to side. So it doesn't have to just drive like a car where you have to like parallel park. You can literally just move side to side. And so Cody was a very cool robot to work on. We did a lot of, firsts in the world with Cody. We did more door opening, more of these service applications, and then ultimately started building into even more sophisticated future versions of Cody that later became commercialized by some companies that were acquired by Google. So that was a really fun exploration. And then that's when we sort of had this renaissance in robotics, where you saw things like the robot operating system, the software system underneath a lot of these, sophisticated robots, kind of like Linux for robotics, as well as a semi-commercial platform called the PR2 robot. It's the one you see on the left. Our PR2 robot was named Gatsby. And this was a really interesting prospect, right? Like Gatsby, or the PR2, there was this company called Willow Garage. They made dozens of them and gave them to researchers all over the world. This is actually a picture of us coming together for that initial beta program. I'm right here in the middle, just above the one that is yellow. And it's really interesting looking at this picture, because as I look around, like I recognize both friends, colleagues, current professors and researchers. There's at least 6 CEOs of robotic companies in here. It's a really interesting group of people. You can see we had a blast. We were dancing with the robots. But these robots were fundamentally safe to operate around people. And it gave us this common platform to start developing all of these robot technologies and tools that now you can just go grab them off the shelf and get things like, localization and mapping right out of the box. You get teleoperation, you get a whole bunch of these really interesting capabilities. And so part of my research was porting all of my old code over to the PR2, again, doing things like medication delivery and handing off meds, being able to go around a house, locate the objects, and then pick them up, as well as having some colleagues who used the PR2 to go up and do things like help a quadriplegic literally shave their face. So actually making physical contact with people intentionally to be helpful. And so I had the unique distinction and pleasure to go through and use the PR2 to do a live demo on TV. And so it was a bit surreal. Here I am sitting on the floor at the CNN studio, adding some new capabilities, right before going on air. But ultimately went on, had the robot deliver medication to Ollie, the host. Really interesting time. It was fascinating for robotics to be part of that built up infrastructure. And so those were kind of the core robots from my grad school days. The entire focus was really like, how do you get access to these robots that cost, $250,000 a piece to do the most cutting edge research? And so that was really why I ended up at the Healthcare Robotics Lab at Georgia Tech. Along the way, we got to do some other fun projects. I built a swarm of wirelessly powered robots. So this is a table that has some big old coils underneath. You apply a bunch of electricity underneath using AC currents. And in the same way that like an RFID tag gets powered up when you hold it up to go in through a door, it would power up these little robots on the top and they would follow a line. And so we did some cool robot swarms that were wirelessly powered. Did some cool work on drones as well as ground vehicles carrying a reader that could power up these tags and take soil measurements, could take water quality measurements, just some fun infrastructure projects that we did and published over time. And then, I finished out the PhD, ended up actually leaving robotics altogether. To be perfectly honest, I was pretty jaded. So many roboticists would focus on building cool robots, but not on solving problems. And so I actually left robotics altogether and spent about 7 or 8 years building medical devices. So I went and did a postdoc fellowship at Duke University. We went and built sort of a different kind of robot, thinking of biological systems kind of like a robot. We built custom chips, custom integrated circuits that would hook into the brains of living dragonflies and read out their brain signals in flight. So basically doing neural stimulation and recording from biological systems. These are the types of technologies that are being used today. Things like Neuralink, the Elon Musk organization. They're used by people that suffer from seizures to combat seizures. And so these are the types of systems that are now being fielded, about a decade later. Also got to work on some other cool, biological sensor measurement type devices. The pictures aren't as interesting because they're, it's just little pictures of little chips. But because of this, I ended up landing at Google X, one of their, moonshot divisions, the group that did autonomous cars and other things. I was brought in to do new healthcare devices. And so the most prominent one was probably the contact lens, right, to measure glucose in your eye. So literally having chips and things embedded in this contact lens that you put in your eye. I was brought in to prototype new applications. So we built some custom chips for implantation. So these are very, very tiny chips, self-contained. You could implant them under your skin and take sensor measurements. Very cool sci-fi type technologies that'll hopefully see the light of day, over the coming decade or so. Biology devices were really interesting, pushing the boundaries, but they have very long time horizons, right? It takes decades to bring new medical devices to market. And so in 2016, I set out with a buddy of mine from SpaceX, and we just started looking for interesting new problems. And we'd, sit down with everyone we knew and say, if you could wave a magic wand and have us solve your most pressing problem, what would you have us do? And one of our old friends was the global director of safety and security at a big tech company. And he asked us pretty point blank, why can't you take those robots and use them, those robots you were building, in grad school, and use them for physical security, right? To make sure that our spaces are safe and effective and that we know what's going on. And not just security, but also facilities, right? To be able to look for leaks and spills and things like that. And so that's what we did. In 2016, I left Google, my buddy left SpaceX, and we set out to make basically a big souped up Roomba that could go around and keep track of buildings to provide safety, security, facilities management functions. So, this robot is incredibly sophisticated. It's got a bunch of different sensors. It's got a lot of computation internally. It runs a lot of computer vision. And so what it does is it autonomously navigates around your environment. It starts to recognize things and build up a model of what is normal. And then it uses all that machine learning and computer vision to detect anomalies, things like open doors, like people, motions, sounds, leaks and spills. And whenever it detects these things, sometimes it responds automatically, but most of the time what it's doing is it's just notifying a remote human being who can come in and have a two-way video conversation, just like we're doing now, right there through the robot. And so by doing that, we're giving those remote operators the ability to jump into a remote robot body, do something useful, and then jump out. And so that allows us to bootstrap a lot of these capabilities that just, probably wouldn't be feasible 100% autonomous today, but to slowly add more and more autonomy to make them more automatic and more dynamic. And so, yeah, just like any, good robot, this robot is also able to go back and charge itself and plug itself in. So it has a dock and it plugs itself back in. But yeah, it's this really interesting application. And I'll show you some examples in a moment. But this robot, when you compare it to those ones in grad school, it's shockingly less sophisticated in many ways. Right? It's not at the boundaries. It doesn't have manipulation and all of these other things, because it turns out there's commercial applications today that can benefit from robots that aren't as sophisticated. And then we can slowly, steadily add more and more capabilities over time. And so, for example, we have a variant of the robot that has a very simple mechanism on it that can reach out and poke elevator buttons, right? It literally just reaches up, pokes the button, goes in the elevator, pokes the button, and is able to ride up and down the elevators. And this sounds shockingly simple. And in many ways it is, right? Conceptually, it is very easy. But it turns out we're the only commercial robot system today that has this capability, right? Just to ride up and down the elevators to go between floors. And so it is applied engineering, it's applied robotics, it's taking all of those lessons that we learned from academia and being able to apply them to make robots that do useful skills, not just the crazy, YouTube videos that you might see for like Boston Dynamic robots. And so, yeah, it really is taking this very, very sophisticated robot, adding in the wisdom and monitoring from remote people to be able to provide these services indoors. And, we detect all sorts of things across the robot fleet every single night. Here's some examples of ones over the last few weeks. These are big leaks and spills that have happened in spaces, overflowing trash cans, unsecured doors. We've had breaking and enterings and unauthorized personnel. We've had healthcare incidents. We've had janitors faint, people stuck in elevators, slip and falls, elevated CO2 levels, lots of OSHA violations, a chemical spill. It's just an incredible amount of stuff happens at these spaces, right? Computer screens being left unlocked, whiteboards unerased, basic cybersecurity vulnerabilities. But fundamentally, it's about being friendly and approachable, right? It's about being a robot that you want to come up and engage with. And so it's these wonderful customer service style interactions that you have and being able to do them across any type of indoor environment, whether it's offices or manufacturing facilities or even in, museums and residential. And so you'll see a lot of these robots in those spaces starting to come to fruition. But more even than that is where the future of this is all headed, right? So you have this amazing computation, you have much, much better sensors readily available, but you're also starting to see elements of that manipulation. And so as you look at things like door opening and these other foundational capabilities, you'll see that there's actually, lots of these systems starting to come online that are able to do this. What used to take the robot 5 or 10 minutes to reach out and open a door, they're now doing it in real time, right? It's literally reaching out and just opening the doors. Or in the case of a mobile robot, being able to reach out, open the door, and actually drive through the door, which again, it adds an additional level of complexity. And so as you see these, interesting YouTube videos online, you're starting to see those robots actually come out into the real world. And these are obviously, engineering prototypes, but the same sort of holds. And so the future of where robots is headed over the next decade is actually very exciting, right? If we look just across service robots, which are a very small subset of robotics, right? You have autonomous cars, you have autonomous farming equipment, all of these other wonderful things coming down the pipe. But you have, obviously we're very much in the security facilities management side, but you're starting to see floor cleaning robots in commercial spaces. Like the Roomba that you have at home, you'll see them in the office. You'll see robots at the grocery store and in retail stores doing things like checking the inventory on the shelves and soon even restocking that inventory. You'll see things in logistics and nursing. If you go to the hospitals, you'll frequently see these robots carrying materials around. And you'll see, new versions of that happening all the time. Certain hotels will have robot bellhops that will bring you room service. these are robots that are deployed today, and they're just accelerating very, very quickly in terms of their rollout. And as you look at outdoor, obviously autonomous cars, where we're at, you'll see them pretty periodically out on the streets. But the security use case comes up again. Things like sweeping, parking lot and road sweepers are being automated. You'll see, electric lawnmowers and things like that are being automated. You can even buy some of those for your own home already, but on the commercial side, they're being automated as well. Window cleaning, etc. And so all of this is really just to highlight, like, it's this very interesting time in robotics where all of these applications are coming to the forefront, really driven by some really big technology trends. And so, as if I was in your shoes coming up, right now through the schooling program at every single level, it's about a few things I think are really important, right? Number one, embrace curiosity. Like, you'll see all sorts of these things, and I've had the luxury of working on a great many of interesting things, but it really boils down to, like, be curious, dig in, learn about these things, and then engage with other people along the way, make friends along the way, right? I think back to those early days in our robotics program. So many friends have gone on to do amazing, interesting things in robotics. And I it's amazingly helpful to be able to call them up and, talk to them about what's going on. We all feed off each other. It's a very collaborative environment together. Work on cool stuff. I think if I had to pick like one piece of advice, like, that's the best one, is like the thing that gives you passion, that you wake up in the morning and you want to go work on it. That's the stuff you should do. And then make sure to document it, like being able to come back and look at these pictures, 10 years later. I'm reminded just of how much progress we've made in such a short time. And it is accelerating. We're seeing lots of development continue, but you'll look back and you'll be, surprised about what you accomplished and what you did. And those things that you did while you were just being curious and exploring turn out to be, very fond memories looking back, and you'll see your natural growth and progression. And so, yeah, with that, I guess I'll open things up for Q&A. But yeah, very happy to have been allowed the opportunity to share my story, how we went from, a young student in Nebraska all the way to running a big multinational robotics company out here in California. So yeah, thank you.
Awesome. We're just so grateful for your presentation. And we already have one question, Travis. Dr. Bing Chen said, how long did it take for you to design your commercial robot from scratch?
Yeah, so it's a bit of a weird question because I didn't put pictures of it, but we had our first version of the robot. Like, there were multiple versions, right? And so the very first thing we did when we were exploring the application was we built a prototype. We built that first prototype in about 2 weeks, and it was a turtle bot. It's kind of like a Roomba vacuum cleaner with 2 5-gallon buckets on top, a laptop, some duct tape, and cardboard. So our first version was 2 weeks, and then we had that out at this nurse staffing company, kind of rolling around at night doing the basic task. The first one that looked like our current product, right, that had sort of that beautiful exterior, that was about 12 months. So we went from nothing to beautiful robot deployed at paying customers in 12 months. And it looked the part, but underneath the hood, it was a lot of duct tape and baling wire. And so then we spent about another 1.5 to 2 years beyond that, really robustifying it and making it to where we could manufacture it. But for us, it was all about verifying that people would find value in the service we provide, and that they would, be willing to pay us to do it.
Interesting. The questions are coming in here. Another question is, what was your greatest challenge as a student or a professional, and how did you overcome?
I mean, my biggest challenge is that I'm inherently a procrastinator. And so, overcoming that, I think, there's this fantastic article called Structured Procrastination, which is basically, if you're not doing the thing that you should be doing, you should at least be doing something that is valuable and interesting. And so, I think, making sure to I wish I had more discipline on many days, but the curiosity and that procrastination have been very lucky for me to have been fruitful, and being more of a maker instead of just a consumer.
Have been very inspired by your drive to make things useful. So that is working out for you, for sure. So let's see our next question. What made you pick the shape of the Copa?
Yeah, so we worked with this world famous industrial designer. His name is Yves Behar, and he's came to fame by designing things like the Aeron chair, right? And so some iconic office furniture. And so our goal was to make a robot that was friendly and approachable, but that could sort of blend into the background in a high-end office environment. And so, we didn't want the robot to look scary. We didn't want it to be like Terminator or RoboCop. We wanted it to be more like friendly, helpful, Big Hero 6, Baymax type robot. And so there's a lot of things that are functionally driven, right? Like the height of the robot is tall enough to where you can interact with both, adults as well as children, to see out over cubicle farms. But the entire robot is made of fabric, so it's soft. You can go up and push and touch on it. It was really to try to make it friendly and approachable. And that was the biggest driver of the design.
That's a great application of STEAM, the art part of robotics, to make it human friendly. We have another question, kind of related. As a robot expert, do you think we will ever in the future get to see robots that will be the AI type we see in the movies, like Terminator, but maybe friendlier, that walk, talk, and act like humans?
So there's two camps in the robotics world. The one that says we should make robots as human as possible, and the one that says we shouldn't. And I pretty strongly fall in the one where we shouldn't, because I think there's benefits to having physical elements that are human-like, right? Like, because it's operating in a human world. So, right, like having arms that share similar structures to human arms, because, we know that works well. But robots are going to be good at a lot of things that people aren't, and vice versa, right? Like, we don't try to make computers that are like humans. We know that computers are really good at running computer programs, and so we make things like we design the tasks that computers do around that. I think robots are very similar. You design it around the tasks and the capabilities that you want. And I think that the human form factor is limiting for robots, right? Like, our robot has thermal cameras. It can see in the dark. It can see heat, right? It can see heat from that thermal camera. And so, it can sense all these different chemicals that people can't. And so I think, you really want to get to a point where, you have people doing the things that people are best at, and you have robots doing the parts that they're best at. And so it really is about being intelligent in how you design the robots to meet those requirements, as opposed to trying to make them more human-like. That said, you will definitely see robots that walk, and that, our robot could do computer synthesized voice. We choose not to, because it's kind of like the Amazon Alexa, the Google Home. Like, it's good sometimes, but when it messes up, it's pretty bad. Well, if you're in a critical function like security and safety, you can't have that type of interaction. So we fall back to a person that is friendly and helpful and customer service oriented. But yeah, increasingly you will see ones that walk, that talk, that have human-like characteristics, and people will inherently anthropomorphize robots. They'll give them human-like characteristics. They'll give them names. They certainly name our robots. And so, yeah, you'll see a nice blend.
So much, and we have one final question. So in your company, about how many of these robots do you have in use across the world?
Yeah, so we don't share particular numbers today, but it is in the hundreds.
Fantastic. And I just have one question. Your robot, we walk up to your robot. Is there like a voice, or do they greet you? What is the experience like when you walk up to your robot?
Yeah, so we don't have the robot do computer voices at all. When you walk up to the robot, a person will pop on the screen and they will say, "Hey, nice to see you. How can I help you?" And that's all very intentional, right? Like, the whole point of our robot is that it is like a security guard, like a remote facilities manager. It's just that the robot is their remote eyes and ears, and it's telling them when and where they should pop up and engage. And so we're not trying to offset that human element. We're trying to embrace it. And then, the robot is just, the remote body that you jump into, do something useful, have a conversation, jump out of, and go to a different one. And so, that one operator could be managing robots here in the United States and some of the robots in Australia or Japan, and they can pop on and have any conversation they want. And you get, it's this entire new class of jobs and opportunities to be able to do that, right? And so we actually manage multiple of these centers that have, many dozens of operators operating simultaneously, controlling that robot fleet. And yeah, it's a very exciting new capability to be operating these robot fleets at scale.
That's amazing. We have enjoyed your answers. That is so, what a way to put a robot into use and to expand the capability of humans. And so we really love your answers and your perspective. So thank you so much, Dr. Travis Deyle, for joining us today. We look forward to following your work at Cobalt and maybe other places. So thank you again.
Yeah, thank you. Take care.
Absolutely. We welcome everyone to continue to explore the breakout sessions that are next. Thank you so much.